If you enjoy stories about survival, family betrayal, and discovering true character in crisis, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and comment your thoughts below. Your support means everything. I'm 56 years old, and I'll never forget the moment gunshots rang out at Charles Kirk Community Center and everyone ran, including my own children. They left me there in my wheelchair, unable to move fast enough to escape. My name is Robert Finley. 10 years ago, a car accident left me paralyzed from the waist down. My wife died in that same accident. Since then, I've raised my 3 children from a wheelchair: Michael, 28, Sarah, 26, and Daniel, 23. We'd gone to Charles Kirk that Saturday afternoon for a community fundraiser. The center was hosting an event to raise money for local schools. Hundreds of people crowded into the main hall: families, kids, elderly folks. It was supposed to be a safe, happy gathering. I was near the refreshment table with my children when we heard the first shot. Sharp, unmistakable crack of a gun. Everyone froze for half a second. Then panic. People screamed, started running toward the exits, pushing, shoving, trampling each other in their rush to escape. I spun my wheelchair around, trying to navigate through the chaos. Michael, Sarah, Daniel. I called out to my children. They'd been right beside me seconds ago. Now, they were running toward the emergency exit with everyone else. Wait! I shouted. Help me? Michael looked back, made eye contact with me. I saw the fear on his face, but I also saw his decision. He kept running, didn't come back for me. Sarah and Daniel didn't even look back. They ran with the crowd, desperate to escape. More gunshots. 3, 4, 5 shots in rapid succession. People screaming louder. The crowd thinned as most escaped through the exits. I was still in the middle of the hall, wheelchair surrounded by overturned chairs and dropped belongings. Alone. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. Where was the shooter? Were they coming toward me? I couldn't run. Couldn't hide effectively. I was a sitting target. I wheeled myself toward a storage closet near the stage, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheels. Adrenaline pumping through my body. Got to the closet, opened the door, pulled myself inside, closed the door as quietly as possible, sat in the darkness, listening. More gunshots, screaming, then sirens in the distance, police responding. I waited. Minutes felt like hours. Tried calling Michael on my phone. No answer. Tried Sarah. No answer. Tried Daniel. Straight to voicemail. My children had abandoned me in an active shooter situation and weren't even checking if I'd survived. The realization hit harder than any bullet could have. They'd saved themselves and left me to die. I stayed in that closet for 45 minutes. Police eventually cleared the building. An officer found me when they were doing final sweeps. Sir, are you okay? Are you injured? I'm fine. I managed, physically anyway. Can you walk? I'm paralyzed. Wheelchair. My kids were supposed to help me, but they ran. The officer's expression changed. Pity mixed with disbelief. They left you here? They left me here. He helped me out of the closet. The main hall looked like a disaster zone. Overturned tables, scattered food, abandoned purses and bags. A few bloodstains where people had been trampled in the panic. What happened? I asked. Who was shooting? 2 teenagers. Gang-related dispute that spilled into the center. They weren't shooting at random people. They were shooting at each other. But obviously, everyone panicked. 1 teenager's dead. The others in custody. So it hadn't even been a mass shooting. Just 2 idiots with guns having a fight. But the panic had been real. The danger had been real. And my children's abandonment had been real. The officer drove me home. My van was still in the Charles Kirk parking lot. I couldn't drive it without my hand controls, and my kids had the keys anyway. At home, I waited. Surely they'd come check on me. Surely they feel guilty and rush back to see if I'd survived. Hours passed. No one came. Finally, at 8 p.m., my phone rang. Sarah, Dad, are you okay? I'm alive, no thanks to any of you. We were so scared. There was shooting everywhere. We had to run. I couldn't run, Sarah. I called for help. You all kept running. Long silence. Then, Dad, it was chaos. We thought you were behind us. I was in a wheelchair. Obviously, I wasn't keeping up with running adults. We were going to come back once it was safe. It's been 6 hours, Sarah. 6 hours, and this is the first time you called to check if your father survived. That's not fair. We were traumatized. I was abandoned by my children in an active shooter situation. Let's talk about fair. I hung up, sat in my living room, shaking with anger and hurt. Michael called next. Same excuses. It was instinct, Dad. Fight or flight. We were terrified. So was I, Michael. But I called for you. I asked for help. You looked at me and kept running. What was I supposed to do? Carry you? We would have both died. You were supposed to remember that I'm your father, that I raised you, that I've sacrificed everything for you since your mother died. You were supposed to not leave me to die alone. Michael got defensive. You're being dramatic. You didn't die. You're fine. Stop guilt-tripping us. I'm not guilt-tripping you. I'm telling you how I feel. Abandoned. Betrayed. Wondering why I spent 10 years raising children who'd leave me behind the first time things got dangerous. Daniel finally called at 10 p.m. He at least sounded genuinely sorry. Dad, I messed up. I panicked. I'm so sorry. Are you sorry you ran? Or sorry you got caught running? Both. I should have helped you. I should have at least made sure you got out. I was just so scared and I stopped thinking. That was the most honest response. Daniel admitted he'd failed, didn't make excuses, just acknowledged his fear had overcome his sense of responsibility. Daniel, I'm glad you're safe, I said, voice softer. But I need you to understand something. Today showed me that I can't rely on my children in a crisis. That's a hard lesson to learn. Can I come over? Can we talk about this in person? Not tonight. I need space. Over the next week, each of my children tried reaching out, wanted to explain, to apologize, to make things right, but their words rang hollow. Actions matter more than apologies. Michael's girlfriend called me. Mr. Finley, Michael feels terrible about what happened. He's been beating himself up all week. Good. He should feel terrible. That's harsh. He made a mistake in a moment of panic. A mistake would be grabbing the wrong coat in his hurry to leave. Leaving his disabled father in an active shooter situation isn't a mistake. It's a choice. And it revealed his true character. She hung up on me. Michael texted later, Kelly says you were really mean to her. Why are you being like this? I didn't respond. If he couldn't understand why I was upset, explaining wouldn't help. Sarah tried a different approach. She came over with groceries. I know you're mad at me, Dad, but you still need to eat. Let me make you dinner. I can make my own dinner, Sarah. I've been doing it for 10 years. I know. I just want to do something nice. To show I care. You can show you care by acknowledging what you did was wrong, not by making casserole. Sarah set down the groceries, sat across from me. Okay, what I did was wrong. I should have stayed with you. I should have made sure you got out safely. I was selfish and cowardly. Thank you for saying that. But Dad, you have to understand, in that moment, every instinct in my body screamed run. I wasn't thinking about responsibility or family or anything except survival. That's human nature. Human nature is also protecting your vulnerable family members. Parents don't abandon their children in danger. Children shouldn't abandon their parents either. But you raised us. You're supposed to protect us, not the other way around. I raised you to be adults who take care of each other. Apparently, I failed. Sarah left crying. I felt guilty, but also justified. My children needed to understand the seriousness of what they'd done. The Charles Kirk incident made local news. Shooting at community center causes panic. Interviews with witnesses describing the chaos, the fear, the desperation to escape. One interview caught my attention. A woman in her 30s. I saw an elderly man in a wheelchair get left behind. His family just ran past him. I want to help, but the crowd pushed me toward the exit. I hope he's okay. So strangers had noticed. Strangers had wanted to help, but my own children hadn't. That evening, a reporter contacted me. Mr. Finley, we heard you were at Charles Kirk during the shooting. Would you be willing to share your experience? Why? Because your story matters. Because people need to hear what happened from someone who couldn't run away. I agreed to an interview. 2 days later, a reporter came to my house with a camera crew. Mr. Finley, tell us about that day at Charles Kirk. I explained everything. The gunshots, the panic, calling for my children, being left behind, hiding in the closet, waiting 45 minutes before police found me. Your children left you there? They did, in their defense. They were terrified. But yes, they ran and I couldn't follow. I was alone. How did that make you feel? Abandoned, betrayed, and questioning everything I thought I knew about my family. The interview aired 3 days later. It went viral. Within 24 hours, hundreds of thousands of people had seen it. Comments flooded in. Those children should be ashamed. This breaks my heart. That poor man. Family mean protecting each other, especially the vulnerable. Those kids failed basic humanity. But not everyone agreed. Some comments defended my children. Flight response is involuntary. You can't blame people for running from gunshots. The dad's being manipulative, guilting his kids for surviving. He's expecting too much. No one thinks rationally during active shootings. My children were furious about the interview. Michael called, angry. Dad, why would you do that? Now the whole internet is calling us terrible people. Are they wrong? Yes. We're not terrible. We made a split-second decision in a life-threatening situation. You made a split-second decision that revealed your true priorities. When danger came, you saved yourselves and forgot about me. What did you want us to do? Die alongside you. I wanted you to remember I exist, to at least try to help, to not leave me behind like I'm disposable. Sarah's response was different. She posted on social media, "My dad gave an interview about Charles Kirk. He's making us look like monsters. The truth is more complicated. Yes, we ran. Yes, he was left behind. But we were terrified. We're not bad people. We're human. I love my father, but he's using this tragedy to punish us, and it's not fair." Her post got shared thousands of times. Now, there were two narratives competing online. Abandoned father versus traumatized children. Daniel stayed quiet. Didn't defend himself publicly. Just sent me a text. "Dad, I know I failed you. I'm working with a therapist to understand why I panic like that. I hope someday you can forgive me." That text meant more than Michael's anger or Sarah's public defensiveness. Daniel was taking responsibility and doing the work to be better. "I appreciate that, Daniel," I replied. "That takes real maturity." Over the next month, the media frenzy died down, but the damage to my family remained. Michael stopped speaking to me entirely. Sarah kept trying to rebuild, but our conversations were strained. Daniel visited weekly, slowly working to repair our relationship. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Daniel said during one visit. "Of course. Do you wish we died trying to save you? Is that what would have made you happy?" "No, Daniel. I'm glad you're alive. I just wish you'd remembered I was there. Even a glance back. Even checking if I needed help. You didn't have to sacrifice yourself. Just acknowledge I existed. I get that now. In the moment, I didn't. My brain went into pure survival mode and forgot about everything else. I'm ashamed of that. The fact that you're ashamed shows growth. Your brother and sister are still making excuses. They're embarrassed. The interview made them look bad publicly. They're defensive because strangers are judging them. They should be embarrassed. What they did was wrong. But Dad, shaming them publicly hasn't helped. It's just made them dig in harder. Maybe a private conversation would have been better? Daniel had a point. By going public, I'd forced my children into a defensive posture, made it harder for them to admit fault, because now their pride was involved. Maybe you're right, I admitted, but I was hurt and angry. I wanted people to know what happened, to validate that what I felt was legitimate. Your feelings are legitimate, but making them public created more problems than it solved. I thought about that conversation for days. Had I handled this wrong? Should I have kept it private? A therapist I'd started seeing said something interesting. Robert, your children's actions hurt you. That's valid, but your public response hurt them. Now everyone's hurt and defensive. Healing requires vulnerability, not vindication. So I should just forgive them? Pretend it didn't happen? No. You should express your pain, expect accountability, and work toward reconciliation. But that's hard to do when everyone's focused on winning a public relations battle. The therapist was right. The interview had turned a family crisis into a public spectacle, made healing harder. I decided to reach out to Michael and Sarah privately, not through phone calls they could avoid, but through letters. To Michael, "Son, I love you. What happened at Charles Kirk hurt me deeply. But our relationship matters more than being right. I'm willing to work through this, if you are. Can we talk? Really talk, not through texts or public posts." To Sarah, "Sweetie, I'm sorry for the interview. I was hurt and wanted the world to understand why. But I shouldn't have aired our family issues publicly. You're right that the situation was complicated. Can we sit down and discuss this like family?" I got responses within days. Michael's was brief. "I'm willing to talk if you're willing to listen." Sarah's was longer. "Dad, I love you so much. I've been tormented by guilt since that day." The interview made it worse because now strangers judge me without knowing the full story. I want to make things right. Let's have dinner. We scheduled a family meeting. All four of us, my 3 children and me, at my house. No phones, no recording, just honest conversation. The meeting was tense at first. Everyone uncomfortable. Finally, I started, "I asked you here because I love you and because our family is broken. Charles Kirk revealed problems we need to address." Michael jumped in. "The problem is you think we're terrible people for saving ourselves." "No, Michael. The problem is you didn't see saving me as part of saving yourselves. You thought about your individual survival, not family survival. Because there wasn't time. It was life or death in seconds." Sarah interrupted. "Michael, stop. Dad's right. We failed him. We can admit that and still acknowledge we were scared." "Thank you, Sarah," I said. "I'm not asking you to have been heroes. Just to have tried, to have looked back, to have cared." Daniel spoke next. "Dad, what do you need from us? How do we fix this?" "Good question. What did I need? I need to know that if something like this happens again, you'll remember I'm here. I need to know I matter enough to you that you wouldn't leave me behind. I need to feel like I'm still your father, not a burden you'll abandon when things get hard." "You're not a burden," Sarah said, tears forming. "You're the best father we could have asked for. You raised us alone after Mom died. You sacrificed everything for us. I'm so ashamed of what I did." She started crying. Real, genuine tears. I've replayed that day 1,000,000 times. In my head, I go back. I grab your wheelchair. I help you escape. But in reality, I ran. And I have to live with that. I wheeled over to Sarah, hugged her. "Sweetheart, I forgive you. But you need to learn from this. Be better." Michael remained quiet throughout. Finally, "I'm not ready to apologize. I'm not sure I did anything wrong. In a crisis, you survive. That's human nature. I'm sorry you were hurt, but I'm not sorry I survived." That honesty, while painful, was actually helpful. Michael wasn't ready to acknowledge wrongdoing. Forcing him wouldn't work. "Michael, I hear you. Thank you for being honest. But understand that your response is why we have trust issues now. Until you can see why leaving me was wrong, regardless of your instincts, we won't truly reconcile." Michael left shortly after that, but Sarah and Daniel stayed. We talked for hours. About fear, about family, about what we owed each other. "Dad, what if something happens and we're not there?" Daniel asked, "What if you need help and we physically can't provide it?" "Then you try and fail. That's different from not trying at all. I'm not asking for perfection, just effort." "We can do that," Sarah promised. Over the next several months, relationships slowly improved. Sarah visited weekly. Daniel called daily. Even Michael eventually reached out, though our conversation stayed surface level. One day, Sarah arrived with news. Dad, I quit my job. What? Why? Because I realized something after Charles Kirk. I've been so focused on my career that I forgot about family. You raised me to prioritize success over relationships. That's wrong. I want to spend more time with you. Sarah, I didn't raise you to quit your job. I raised you to be independent. And I am, but independence doesn't mean isolation. I want balance. She found a new job with better hours, closer to home. Started having dinner with me twice a week. Daniel made changes too. Dad, I'm moving closer to you. My apartment's 40 minutes away. That's too far if you need help. I found a place 10 minutes from you. Daniel, you don't have to rearrange your life for me. Yes, I do, because family means being there. Actually, physically there, not just in theory. These changes move me. My children were showing through actions, not just words that they'd learned. Michael remained distant. We'd see each other at holidays, but there was a wall between us. Until one day he called. Dad, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about Charles Kirk nonstop, and I think I know why I ran. Why? Because I was angry at you. For the accident 10 years ago. For Mom dying. For you surviving when she didn't. I've been subconsciously blaming you for needing a wheelchair. For changing our family. And in that moment of crisis, my suppressed anger made it easy to leave you behind. This was the most honest Michael had ever been. Son, that's huge. Thank you for telling me. I'm starting therapy. Working through my grief about Mom. I realize I've been unfair to you. You didn't choose that accident. You've done your best raising us alone. I'm sorry I've held resentment. I forgive you, Michael, and I'm proud of you for getting help. Our relationship slowly improved after that. Michael visited more often. Eventually apologized for leaving me at Charles Kirk. I was wrong, Dad. Trauma or not, fear or not, I should have helped you. You deserve better from me. Thank you, son. That means everything. 2 years after Charles Kirk, my family was healthier than it had been in decades. The shooting had broken us initially, but ultimately forced us to address issues we've been avoiding. Sarah was engaged to a kind man who treated her well. Daniel had been promoted at work. Michael was in a healthy relationship and making progress in therapy. And me? I'd learned something important. The accident 10 years ago had made me physically dependent on my children. But I'd never addressed the emotional complexity of that dependence. Never talked to them about how my needs affected their lives. Never processed their grief about their mother. Charles Kirk forced those conversations. Painful as it was, the crisis had been necessary. One evening, all 3 children came over for dinner. We were laughing about something when Sarah suddenly got serious. Dad, can I say something? I know this is random, but I need to. Of course. 2 years ago at Charles Kirk, I failed you. I ran when you needed me. That will haunt me forever. But it also changed me, made me realize what's important. I'm a better person now because I had to face my worst moment. Daniel nodded. Same. I was shallow before, focused on myself. Charles Kirk showed me I needed to grow up. Becoming the kind of person who doesn't abandon family in crisis has been my focus since then. Michael added, I've learned that trauma reveals character but doesn't define it. We can fail and still become better. Dad, you taught us that through forgiveness. Thank you. I looked at my 3 children, imperfect, flawed, but trying. I love you all. You disappointed me at Charles Kirk, but you've shown me who you really are since then. That matters more. The Charles Kirk Community Center reopened a year after shooting. They'd renovated, added security, created protocols to prevent future incidents. They invited me to the reopening ceremony. Mr. Finley, would you say a few words? Your story resonated with people. Your presence would mean a lot. I agreed. My children came with me. Walking and wheeling back into that building was surreal. Last time I'd been here, I was hiding in a closet, abandoned and terrified. This time, my children flanked me protectively. Sarah had her hand on my shoulder. Daniel held the door. Michael stayed close, alert and protective. The difference was visible. They'd learned. I spoke to crowd. 2 years ago, the center saw a tragedy. Gun violence. Panic. People running for their lives. I was here that day, and I experienced something that hurt me deeply. My own children left me behind. People murmured, recognizing me from the viral interview. But I'm not here to shame them. I'm here to tell you that crisis reveals character, but redemption defines it. My children made a mistake. They acknowledged it. They changed because of it. We're closer now than we were before that terrible day. Charles Kirk broke my family, but it also gave us a chance to rebuild stronger. That's what I want you to take from this story. When we fail the people we love, we have a choice. Stay defensive or grow. My children chose growth. I'm proud of them. The speech was well received. Afterward, several people approached me. One older woman said, "My son left me in a fire 3 years ago. Ran out and forgot I was in the bedroom. I've never forgiven him. Maybe I should reconsider." It's not about excusing what he did. I replied, it's about deciding whether the relationship has value beyond one terrible moment. For me, my children's value outweighed their failure. She nodded thoughtfully. Thank you. A man in his 30s. I'm a firefighter. I see people abandon each other in emergencies all the time. It's more common than anyone admits. But I also see families rebuild after. Your story gives hope. These conversations showed me the interview 2 years ago, while painful and possibly ill-advised, had created important dialogue about family, about crisis, about forgiveness. That evening, my children took me to dinner. "Dad, that speech was perfect," Sarah said. "You could have used the platform to bash us again. Instead, you showed grace. Because bashing you 2 years ago didn't help. Grace helps. Growth helps." Michael raised his glass. "To Dad, for being patient with us, for forgiving us, for showing us who we want to be." We toasted. A family rebuilt from ashes. 3 years after Charles Kirk, I received an unexpected call. "Mr. Finley, this is Detective Morrison. I worked the Charles Kirk shooting. I wanted to follow up with you." "Why?" "Because we're doing a study on civilian behavior during mass panic events. Your case was particularly interesting. Family dynamics during crisis. Would you be willing to participate in research?" I agreed. The research involved interviews with me and my children about decision-making under extreme stress. The findings were fascinating. Apparently, when people hear gunshots, their brains short-circuit. Rational decision-making shuts down. Only the most deeply ingrained instincts remain. Mr. Finley, your children's response, running without you, is unfortunately common. Family members often separate during panic. The brain's survival mechanism overrides social bonds temporarily. So they couldn't help it? Not entirely. They had control, but exercising that control required overcoming powerful biological drives. Most people can't do it in the moment. Training helps, but natural instinct is to preserve individual life first. This research didn't excuse my children's behavior, but it contextualized it. They'd failed a biological test most humans fail. The interesting part, the detective continued, is what happened after. Most families don't recover from this kind of betrayal. Yours did. That's remarkable. What made the difference? Honesty, accountability, willingness to forgive and be forgiven, and time. The research was published in a psychology journal. Our family became a case study in crisis response and recovery. It was strange seeing our private pain become academic material, but if it helped others, it was worth it. Media occasionally still contacted me. Whatever happened with the family from Charles Kirk, I'd give brief updates. We're doing well. We've healed. 5 years after the shooting, I had a health scare. Heart attack. Collapse at home alone. Managed to call 911, but was unconscious when paramedics arrived. I woke up in the hospital. All 3 of my children were there. They'd rushed to the hospital the moment they'd heard. Sarah held my hand. Daniel stood at the foot of my bed. Michael leaned against the wall, looking worried. "You scared us, Dad," Sarah said softly. "Didn't mean to." "We're not leaving," Michael said firmly. Until you're discharged and settled at home, one of us will be here with you at all times. And they kept that promise. They took shifts staying with me in the hospital. Sarah handled daytime. Daniel took evenings. Michael covered nights. When I was discharged, they'd arrange for a home nurse. They coordinated their schedules to ensure someone was always nearby. They'd learned from Charles Kirk. They would never leave me alone in crisis again. You don't have to do all this, I told them. Yes, we do, Sarah replied. 5 years ago, we failed you. We won't fail you again. That commitment moved me deeply. They'd truly changed. My recovery took months. During that time, I saw my children's character clearly. They weren't perfect, no one is, but they were dedicated. They showed up. They cared. Michael and I grew especially close. He'd visit every evening after work. We'd watch sports, talk about life, sometimes discuss the shooting. Dad, do you still think about Charles Kirk? Sometimes. Less than I used to. Why? Because I think about it constantly. It's my biggest regret. The moment I failed you. I've spent 5 years trying to make up for it. Michael, you have made up for it. Through consistency. Through being here. You don't need to carry that guilt forever. It's hard to let go. I know, but I've forgiven you. Can you forgive yourself? I'm working on it. Those conversations help both of us heal. Michael was learning self-forgiveness. I was learning to accept that my children were human, capable of both failure and growth. 6 years after Charles Kirk, Sarah had her first child, a daughter named Emma. I became a grandfather. Holding baby Emma, I thought about family, about legacy, about what we passed down through generations. Sarah, promise me something. Raise Emma to understand that family protects family, that in crisis, we don't abandon each other. Learn from our mistakes so she never has to make them. I promise, Dad. Emma will grow up knowing her family stays together. Always. Daniel got married that same year. His wife, Michelle, was wonderful. Smart, kind, compassionate. She'd heard about Charles Kirk and told me once, Mr. Finley, Daniel talks about that day often. He's determined to be the kind of man who doesn't run when things get hard. You raise him well. He learned through failure. That's the hardest way to learn, but the most effective. Michael proposed to his girlfriend. Their relationship was built on honesty and communication. Qualities Michael had developed after Charles Kirk forced him into therapy. My children were thriving. They'd taken the worst moment of their lives and used it as a catalyst for growth. That's all I'd ever wanted. 7 years after the shooting, Charles Kirk Community Center hosted an anniversary event. 7 years of resilience. How our community healed. I was invited to speak again. This time, I talked about the long-term impacts of crisis. 7 years ago, gunshots rang out in this building. People panicked. Families separated, including mine. For a long time, I was angry about that, felt betrayed. But 7 years later, I understand something important. Crisis is a test we don't choose to take. Some people pass immediately. Some fail and learn. What matters is who we become after. My children failed me at Charles Kirk, but they've spent 7 years proving that failure doesn't define them. They've been there for my heart attack, for my recovery, for every difficult moment since. They learned. If you experienced trauma here, if you ran when someone needed you, if you failed someone you loved, you're not alone. Most people fail crisis tests. The question is, what have you done since? Have you learned? Have you changed? Have you rebuilt what was broken? The speech was well received. Several audience members approached me afterward with their own stories of family crisis and recovery. One struck me particularly, a woman whose teenage son had run during a school shooting, leaving her behind. She'd been shot and survived, but their relationship had been destroyed. I can't forgive him, she told me. He was 16, old enough to know better. He left me to die. How old is he now? 23. Has he tried to make amends? Constantly. He calls, visits, apologizes. But I can't forget what he did. I understand. But let me ask you this. Do you want to spend the rest of your life carrying that anger? Because you will. If you can't forgive him, That's your right. But it will poison you more than it punishes him. She cried. I don't know how to forgive something so terrible. Start by deciding if the relationship has value beyond that moment. For me, my children's value exceeded their failure. If your son has that value, forgiveness becomes possible. Not easy, but possible. I gave her my contact information. Call me if you want to talk more. I've been where you are. She did call several times over the next year. We talked through her pain. I couldn't make her forgive her son, but I could show her that forgiveness was survivable. Eventually, she reconciled with him. She called to tell me, we'll never forget what happened, but we're rebuilding. Thank you for showing me it was possible. These connections with other survivors became important to me. I started speaking regularly about crisis and family dynamics. Not as a motivational speaker. I'm not that polished, but as someone who'd lived through it and survived. My children supported this work. Daniel often came with me to events, sharing his perspective. I'm the guy who ran, who failed his father, and I've spent 8 years learning to be better. If you failed someone, there's hope. His willingness to be vulnerable helped people. Seeing the person who'd done wrong take accountability gave others permission to do the same. Michael eventually joined too. I'm the son who had to work through anger and resentment before I could see my own failure clearly. Therapy saved me. Honesty saved my relationship with my father. Both are possible for you too. Sarah spoke about forgiveness from the other side. I'm the daughter who was forgiven when I didn't deserve it. My father's grace changed my life. If you're waiting for someone to forgive you, be patient and be consistent in showing you've changed. Together, we became a family that spoke openly about our worst moment and what we learned from it. It was healing for us and apparently helpful for others. 8 years after Charles Kirk, I retired from my engineering job. At my retirement party, my children gave speeches. Michael, Dad built a career while raising 3 kids alone from a wheelchair. He never complained, never made us feel like burdens. He's the strongest person I know. Sarah, Dad taught us that physical limitations don't define you. That character matters more than ability. That forgiveness is powerful. I'm who I am because of him. Daniel, Dad could have given up after the accident, could have been bitter about his paralysis. Instead, he lived fully, showed us how to overcome obstacles. I hope I'm half the man he is. Their words meant everything, not because they were praising me, but because they reflected growth. 8 years ago, these same children had run from gunshots without looking back. Now they were standing beside me, acknowledging my value, showing through actions and words that they'd learned. 9 years after Charles Kirk, I experienced something that brought everything full circle. There was a fire alarm at Daniel's apartment building. Faulty wiring, nothing serious, but everyone had to evacuate. Daniel called me afterward, voice shaking with emotion. Dad, something happened today that I need to tell you about. What is it? The fire alarm went off. Everyone was evacuating, and there was an elderly man in a wheelchair in the hallway. Reminded me so much of you. He was struggling, moving slowly, and people were rushing past him. I knew where this was going. What did you do? I stopped, went back, helped him get down the stairs, physically carried him while someone else grabbed his wheelchair, got him outside safely. The whole time, all I could think about was Charles Kirk, about you, about how I should have done this 9 years ago. My eyes filled with tears. Daniel, that's beautiful. You learned the lesson. You became the person you should have been. I felt like I got a second chance to do it right this time. It doesn't erase what I did to you, but it showed me I've changed. That's exactly what I've wanted. Not for you to live in guilt, but to become better. You did that today. Daniel told his siblings about the incident. It affected them deeply too. Sarah started volunteering with a disability advocacy group. Michael took a first aid and emergency response course. We're all trying to be people who don't run anymore, Michael told me, who help instead of flee. You taught us that through your forgiveness. 10 years after the shooting, Charles Kirk Community Center held a major memorial event, a decade of healing. They'd invited everyone who'd been there that day to share their stories. I spoke again, but this time my children spoke alongside me. Sarah went first. 10 years ago, I heard gunshots and ran. I left my disabled father behind. I was 26 years old enough to know better. But I panicked. For a decade, I've lived with that shame. But I've also worked to become someone different. Someone who stays. Someone who helps. I volunteer now with organizations that support people with disabilities in emergencies. I teach evacuation protocols that include accommodating everyone. I'm trying to prevent others from making my mistake. Daniel spoke next. I ran too. And for years, I told myself it was just instinct, that I couldn't help it. That was a lie. I could have helped. I chose not to in that moment. But every day since, I've made different choices, better choices. I moved closer to my father. I check on him daily. I helped a stranger in a wheelchair evacuate during a fire. I'm not trying to erase what I did. I'm trying to show that failure doesn't have to be forever. Michael was last. I was the worst. I not only ran, but I looked back at my father and kept running anyway. And for years, I justified it, made excuses, blamed trauma. But the truth is, I was selfish. I was angry at my father for reasons that had nothing to do with that day. Charles Kirk revealed problems I've been hiding from. Getting help, working through my issues, rebuilding my relationship with my father. That's been the work of the last decade. I failed him then. I try not to fail him now. Then I spoke. My children have shared their failures. Now I'll share mine. After Charles Kirk, I was angry, hurt, betrayed, and I handled it poorly. I did a media interview that shamed them publicly. I used their worst moment as a weapon. That was wrong. Yes, they'd hurt me, but my response hurt them too. Real healing came when I stopped trying to punish them and started trying to understand them. When they stopped making excuses and started taking responsibility. 10 years later, I can say this. My children failed me once, but they've succeeded in becoming better people because of it. The event ended with families embracing. People who've been strangers 10 years ago, united by trauma, now friends united by survival and growth. A teenager approached me afterward. Mr. Finley, I'm 16. I was at my school during a lockdown last year. I hid in a closet while my best friend, who uses a walker, struggled in the hallway. I didn't help her. She made it to safety, but I felt guilty ever since. Your story helped me understand I can change. I can be better. Yes, you can, I told him. You're already starting by acknowledging what happened. Stay in your friend's life. Show through your actions going forward that you've learned. That's all anyone can do. Today, I'm 66 years old. 10 years have passed since gunshots rang out at Charles Kirk Community Center, and my children ran, leaving me behind in my wheelchair. Those minutes alone, waiting in a dark closet, thinking I might die, were the worst of my life. The hours and days after, realizing my children had abandoned me, were nearly as bad. The weeks of anger and hurt and betrayal tested every relationship I had. But here's what I've learned in 10 years. Crisis reveals character, but it doesn't define it. My children revealed their fear, their selfishness, their panic. But over 10 years, they've defined themselves differently. Through consistency, through change, through becoming people who stay instead of run. Michael is 38 now, married with 2 kids. He's taught them about responsibility, about protecting vulnerable family members. When we're together, he's attentive, always aware of what I need, ready to help. Sarah is 36, mother of 3. She volunteers with disability organizations and has created emergency protocols at her children's school to ensure no one gets left behind. She's turned her failure into purpose. Daniel is 33, recently had his first child. He lives 5 minutes from me and visits almost daily. He's the most consistent presence in my life. The son who learned his lesson most deeply and lives it most completely. They heard gunshots and everyone ran, even my kids. That's the story of the worst day of my life. But the story doesn't end there. It continues through 10 years of repair, growth, forgiveness, and rebuilt trust. Through my children learning that character is shown not in one moment of panic, but in thousands of moments of choosing to stay, to help, to care. They failed me at Charles Kirk, but they've spent a decade succeeding and becoming people who wouldn't fail me again. And that transformation, from the children who ran to the adults who stay, that's the real story. Crisis will come again. I'm 66, disabled and aging. There will be more health scares, more emergencies, more moments that test my children. But I'm not worried anymore, because I've watched them become people who pass those tests, who've learned that family means staying, even when instinct screams to run, who understand that protecting vulnerable people isn't optional, it's essential. 10 years ago, they left me behind. Today, they surround me with love, support, and unwavering commitment. The distance from there to here has been long and painful, but we've traveled it together. That's the ending to the story that started with gunshots and abandonment. Not a fairy tale ending where everything's perfect, but a real ending where broken things are mended, failures are learned from, and families are rebuilt stronger than before. They ran. They failed. They learned. They changed. And I learned something too, that forgiveness isn't weakness, that people can grow, and that the worst moment of our lives can become catalysts for the best versions of ourselves. The gunshots at Charles Kirk still echo sometimes in my memory, but they're overshadowed now by 10 years of my children, proving that one moment of failure doesn't define a lifetime of character. If this story resonated with you, please hit subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been abandoned in a crisis? Have you ever failed someone in a moment of panic? How do families rebuild after trauma? What does forgiveness look like in your life? I'd love to hear your perspectives and experiences. Remember, crisis reveals character, but redemption defines it. Failure isn't permanent unless we refuse to learn from it. And family is built not in perfect moments, but in how we respond after imperfect ones. Thanks for reading. And know that if you failed someone or been failed by someone, there's always a path to healing if both sides are willing to walk it.